All right, babies. I was going through a certain train of thought, uh, and was watching a video that was super beautiful because it was very, should I say honest? Yeah. It was recommended by somebody, and we had no. So let me tell you what happened first, and then we'll kind of like get into the details. So the title of today's episode should be, uh, the best way, no, not the best way. The way you would understand is called, I would call it manifesting approach. But as I tell you the story right now, I would actually see how the title would be manifesting approaches. And in a way, right now is where we kind of like get to that point. So what happened was I went to the mountains in order to chill, write some stuff, think differently, and that was the complete intention. And it worked beautifully. Uh, I got to do some things. I got to have some conversations, and I got to spend like some time with myself, honestly. But I considered a lot of things. So that is time me and myself having fun, let's just say. So I came and like a guy I met actually said that shared a video with me, and it's a very video about like uh, fasting, but on speaking. And the goal behind it is not to move the throat, not to activate the throat. And the idea behind it is activating the throat. So I thought of it differently, but that's the video. The idea behind the video is the throat affects the body, which I agree. Movement, anything affects other people. And if the throat is quiet, then maybe like, then not maybe. Then you basically, you get the chance basically to kind of like have a conversation with yourself. And he specifically said to get to know God. And he's using all kinds of snippets from like the Quran in order to like explain them and to like establish some things. And I agree with everything he says. I completely understand how like just being quiet, not being quiet, like silence, it, it, it silence as a skill, right? So I wanted to think about it in the way that I think. And if silence is a skill, then ultimately, like, what are we paying for it? Not speaking. And suddenly you realize, like, sure, we're excited more to speak in a way. I understand when I'm silent and with myself for a while, I'd want to see people afterwards, right? So all of these kind of like started clicking in. And as I was thinking about it and the power of silence, because like it really detaches you from society, it detaches you from your interaction with this world, correct? When you're speaking with this world, you're connecting to it. When you're not, you kind of like slowly and like you take a step back. That's basically it. That's any way you explain it. Is the more I'm speaking to somebody, the further away I am from myself because I become very reactive, responsive, ingrained in that conversation. And again, the silence sometimes when you're working, that's how you become silent and you kind of like focus. It's not just the receptive part. It's the fact that if you're actually expressing the honest flow, I'm thinking about it right now. The honest flow happens in silence. When you are silent, you're in a state of flow. Have you, as anyone, well, you can get into a state of flow through talking, but then basically you're just watching yourself having these words, right? Like that's when you're lecturing or when me, for example, you're talking about one thing and you persist until you kind of like hit like one of those golden holes, if we were to explain it that way, where it's like a lot of things are coming out and you're kind of just like seeing how it goes and how it flows and picking the things you want to include in the conversation. It's a surreal experience for me at the very least. But that's basically how I guess regressed backwards from the religious aspect, because the religious aspect kind of like requires that faith that you actually believe to go try something. And it's funny because now that I say it that way, in a way, I am building my belief after I realized I didn't really like believe in myself. And after I realized I didn't really trust myself, I didn't really love myself. And it's not any other's fault, but the fact that I kept allowing things to kind of like happen without me taking a step back. It's funny now I'm reflecting on it this way. But like the articulation is different. But I noticed at one point that something was off, right? And basically, I had no idea how to articulate it. So I did some stuff until it was articulated differently and differently and differently. And that's basically like kind of seeing your position and moving backwards. And the fun part is like whatever I applied in order to move backwards, the same mistakes happen when people kind of like trust something blindly. So blind belief, there's belief and there's blind. So here's where sovereignty kicks in. Because I either believe honestly or I believe because I want to believe. Wanting to believe is different than believing. State of want is different. But again, like we really have to go like I believe, I you really have to make the claim for you to see things differently. But sometimes the claim itself is enough for you to kind of like build your mindset around it instead of actually like following through and like seeing how you articulate it differently until you get to a point. So for me, at the very least, anyway, I would explain it. I had lost my way. And when I say my way, it's not like I was doing something wrong. It's just like I wasn't in tune with myself. And I was too opinionated about who I was. And those opinions probably like died a while back or stopped being relevant, right? Because they're like objective from the outside. They're not kind of like something is expressed and I'm trying to understand what got impressed. But the idea behind it is because like the more you're actually in silence, and he explains that you're talking to God, right? And for me, it's like I'm talking to Tariq in the eyes, like giving yourself the chance to unlock from your persona, the physical, like the persona you use in the real world, the ego, which is not bad. It's just kind of like, where are we? How do we want to proceed? It's like your partners, you're in this together. And so that kind of like that's basically where I am right now, whatever I'm explaining it to you. But their explanation is you will start getting inspirations, which I completely agree because you really are kind of taking space to empty the clutter from yourself and to kind of like reorganize. Sometimes a whole lot of like scenarios in your head are saying the same thing, right? So once you don't have to like remove the scenario or articulate it to its dead, but at the very least, if you discover a bit of it, it becomes easier. So you have more space to do more stuff. And that's where kind of like, oh, I've been thinking about this and these are my thoughts. So these things kind of like are either jumbled through. And I don't think, based on studies, thoughts are basically ranked by emotion. And I think these are time slots of the mind. So that's a good way to actually to explain it. I really wanted to explain it from my perspective because I felt I was getting taken away by what he's saying. But ultimately, what we're doing is, if we look at emotions as kind of like as a hierarchy within themselves, and the same way we could do it when it comes to like our social life, right? Like it's like you have the people closest to you, and then basically you have the people that you just met, and everything in between is kind of like an emotional hierarchy, unless somebody kind of like shows you something. It's like you met somebody and he's super cool, or you met somebody who's super interesting, and it flows with you. The hierarchy wouldn't change. Now, in times of weakness, we want to abdicate that responsibility. So what we do instead of handling our emotions and actually like interacting with them, building this relationship with them, and allowing ourselves to understand honestly where they come from, are they relevant for where you are right now, right? Because you probably can look at yourself and be like, man, I want to hang out with my best friend. Sure, that's a good thought and something you want to do. And then you call your best friend who's somewhere all the way across the world. And then you get upset, but it's fine, you got to talk to him. But then the next 2 days later, oh, I he was here, I would have been able to sit with him. And so that's what you're doing, is you're giving that emotion more space, or more time from your day, like, because we're looking at time slots. But like emotions have time slots in the day. They also have, we're giving them. That's the power we gave them, because we're not actually taking responsibility for our direct, for what's on the top of our minds. Mostly because we're always interacting with the outside world. So whatever is on the top of my mind becomes kind of like, clutter, annoyance, something like that. But in silence, you can actually like pay attention to it. And he was saying that you get inspired, you get inspirations, all that good stuff. I completely agreed with him. And the reason I agreed is because I completely think that I completely believe that we definitely we create this reality. Everything that's outside is based on our creation. And the more we harmonize with the energy that's flowing through us into this world, the more we harmonize, the more this world is going to start looking more like us. It's that simple. And what do I mean by that? That's the next video, which is basically, I forgot what I called it, something about manifestation types or something. Oh, my bad. I hit stop and I'm recording this last part. Before I go, it's a video.